What's up everybody, it's your boy, Unpaid Child Support, and in this video, I'll be showing you how to absolutely embarrass every enemy in Elden Ring using one weapon, and one weapon only, the Wing of Astel. How is this weapon exactly game-breaking? Well, for one, its charged attack is a double slash that deals stupid damage and poise damage, and its unique skill Nebula deals, you guessed it, stupid damage and poise damage. So right away, there is a slight issue, and that's getting the weapon and the stats for it. Hey, look at that, it just showed up in my inventory. What a stroke of luck that is. Before we get into any boss fights or anything like that, there's one thing that I've got to do, and it's something I should have done years ago. Now, the second slight issue is that I don't have the stats to wield the weapon, and instead of spending my precious time farming enemies, I gave myself an ungodly amount of runes, and then I let these Godric soldiers get a free kill so I'd lose the runes that I didn't need after getting enough to upgrade my stats properly. Before taking on Margit, I went on a bit of a detour that included gathering the Physic Flask, the first Dectus Medallion, the second Dectus Medallion, Radagon's Source Seal, and a shitload of legitimately obtained runes that I definitely got using only the Wing of Astel and not a bleed weapon, such as the Flail. I felt like I had enough intelligence for now, so I upgraded some other stats instead. I also went to the Weeping Peninsula Erdtree Avatar and took him out so I could get the Opaline Bubble Tier for the early game. The first victim at the hands of the Wing of Astel is none other than Margit, the Homeless. I tried opening up the fight with a charged heavy, but I forgot how short the range actually is on the thing. Now I know what you're thinking. Brandon, how on earth is the Wing of Astel better than my Moonveil, Terra Magica, Comet Azure, double-barreled suck-and-fuck Supreme build that I've been using for 100 hours of my playthrough now? Well, first of all, as a person who had that exact build in his first playthrough of Elden Ring, knock that shit off and use a real weapon like a man, okay? Second of all, I wasn't playing around when I said this thing is a stagger machine. The unique skill isn't doing much damage yet because the weapon isn't even really upgraded at this point, but that doesn't matter. You can stagger the balls off of any enemy or boss in the game. You still can't be greedy though. You will, in fact, still get punished if you try to be Superman. I mean, like look at this shit. What is this, like the third stagger of the fight already? Oh yeah, let's see a riposte check. Oh, God, that is what the doctor ordered right there. I felt like we were lacking a bit in the damage department, so I went on another gathering spree, starting with the Golden Vow Ash of War. And then I very nicely asked Alexander for his Warrior Jar Shard so I could boost the power of our skill even more. It's not the enhanced version that you get at the end of his quest, but 10% more damage now versus having to wait until Farum Azula for an extra 5% of damage. I mean, it's a pretty easy trade-off in my opinion. And then I got the most important physic tier for the run, considering the weapon deals pure magic damage. The Magic Shroud and Crack tier. Yeah, and at this point, the main Stormveil Gate is like a walk in the park to me. Out of sheer embarrassment, I decided to come back later after upgrading my weapon with the help of the Carrion Blacksmith E.G. He's a great early source if you're using a Somber Smithing Stone weapon in the run. With new additions to the build, I was eager to use Godric as a guinea pig and test our damage numbers. The results may or may not be surprising. It went exactly how I expected it, to be honest. A quarter of his health gone pretty much instantly. Poor Godric is just trying to live up to his father's namesake and is just fighting us more out of desperation than anything. It's funny fighting him now and then thinking back about how I reacted when I was playing the game for the first time. But now is not the time for nostalgia. This dude's about to get his ass busted. In his Phase 2 opening attack, it took 1 L2 to stagger, 2 L2s for a little more, 3 L2s to gag him, and 4 to slam the door. I hope that you're already starting to see the vision here, folks. This weapon is only gonna get better throughout the run. I wouldn't be fighting Renala for a while, but I still grabbed the Academy key right after Godric. And then I took the Dectus lift to Altus Plateau so I could trigger the Radahn Festival and gather some more important items, including, but not limited to, Gillica's Brainstem, the Ritual Sword Talisman, a Somber Smithing Stone 6, and 5 from the old Altus Tunnel. And believe me, a level 6 Wing of Astel is more than enough for Radahn. The Wing of Astel skill, Nebula, is already cracked as it is, but against larger enemies like Starscourge Radahn, the damage numbers you can see are nothing short of goddamn electric. The skill is basically comprised of a wave of little galaxies that all explode with their own individual hitboxes, so logically speaking, the larger an enemy, the more of these little hitboxes are going to get hit by. That explains why Radahn was getting straight up fried right here and took like 10,000 damage in 20 seconds. When he crash landed from his phase transition, he was dead before he even knew it. That's why I haven't been neglecting my endurance stats so far, because spamming the Ash of War is a way to fast track yourself to victory with this weapon. All of this mind and intelligence got me feeling like a damn sorcery build out here. One of the final key pieces and staples of a good build for this weapon is the magic scorpion charm. Since that means doing Celavis's quest, I, of course, had to make it to him first. His quest isn't too hard, it's just a bunch of running around at the end of the day. It's also the only time that I enjoyed siding with Gideon on something. And no, I don't have the locations of all the Starlight Shards or Amber Starlight memorized, but that's why we have guides on YouTube. So after like 30 or 40 minutes of playing Fetch, I got myself the final big boost to our magic damage of the run. Terra Magica is obviously another buff I could make use of, but that's really not going to be useful outside of a handful of bosses in this game. It's not really practical to stand inside of Terra Magica in most of the boss fights in this game. Next, I went back down underground to wake up the cicadas and to further advance Ronnie's quest. Normally, I don't fight the Regal Ancestor, Fortisax, or Astel, but fighting Astel is fitting for this run since the weapon is basically a part of him. So I went to the Divine Tower of Liurnia to grab the Curse Mark of Death, killed this fake Astel for a somber 7, and eventually I arrived in Nox Stella. Ah yes, the Lake of Rot. Boomers make it seem like they had to wade through a mile of this shit to get to school every day just so they could call their black classmates a slur. Now even though this place sucks, there is a somber 8 down here. Oh my god, damn dude, I'm about to fight Astel with a +9 weapon already. Is that even legal? I was so excited to get into the fight that I forgot to drink my physic before I entered the arena. You thought Radahn was taking a lot of damage. Wait until you see this shit. Another added bonus of the Wing of Astel is that it deals 20% more damage to gravity enemies, which are comprised of the Onyx and Alabaster Lords, Falling Star Beast, the random Malform Stars, and you guessed it, Astel himself. Or herself. Nothing specifically masculine or feminine jumps out at me from this thing. If I told you that it only took 3 hits from the L2 to kill Astel from here and you didn't believe me, I'm gonna chalk that up to you either not paying attention or simply being a hater. Imagine getting destroyed this badly from a weapon made from your own flesh and blood. Could not be me. After that, it was time to head into Raya Lucaria, where I found this large stray dog and put it out of its misery. I also put Moongrum out of his misery. I am not getting parried by this dude ever again. I cannot get embarrassed like that anymore. There's a reason why I was putting off the Renala fight for this long. I have a +9 weapon, but her magic resistance is off the charts, even in Phase 1. I think I had to go through like 3 cycles just to get her down to Phase 2. And it's also the reason why her fight's gonna be sped up a little bit, because this fight is so tedious and just straight up gross, man. It's not even funny. This fight is in no way rewarding mentally, physically, spiritually, economically, any adverb you can think of. It is just simply not it. As time goes on, I dislike Renala's fight more and more. After I got her health down a little more, she summoned the real boss of the fight, the friggin' Bloodhound Knight, just to piss me off even more. I know the concept of the video is to break the game using the weapon, but let's face it, when you're using something that deals magic damage to Renala, you're not breaking shit, you're just gonna have to sit here and suffer. And since I didn't really invest any points into dexterity, my physical damage was pretty lackluster on top of that. But eventually, I was able to get rid of the Queen of Feet. Since my journey was taking me to Lanedell soon, it was time to get a hold of Margit's Shackle. I am normally not one to spare Patches' life, and this time was no different. If you saw my incantation only run video, linked in the description by the way, you'll know that an easy way to kill the Draconic Tree Sentinel is to sneak up and cast Poison Mist and watch his health just drain away. However, trickery would not be necessary for this encounter because his health bar gets absolutely melted with a few uses of our Nebula skill. You can't riposte DTS, but he has a short stagger animation that allows you to get free damage off, and that was enough of a window to kill him. Damn, this game is getting, like, stupid easy by now. Godfrey's Shade is normally a walk in the park, but this time around, either my brain wasn't working right, or it's the one boss that is the one and only foil of this weapon. I started off okay, and to be fair, I was in a decent groove, but I ran into a slight issue on the jump attack technique that's a staple of this fight. I couldn't do it without taking damage for some reason. So I was basically chipping away at his health for the entire fight, and then I just said fuck it, and I got pretty lucky with a charged R2 kill right before my brains got splattered all over the Erdtree Sanctuary. Morgott, on the other hand, was dead so quickly that I honestly felt like I forgot to record the fight when I was looking for the footage. Margit's Shackle did its job and let me take out over half of his health without taking a hit. Now, it was a bit tricky after the opening assault on Morgott because his frontal lobe developed and he actually began dodging attacks, which was not very cash money. But I eventually got a chance to get off a charged attack into Ash of War combo to end the fight. I had to take some damage, but, you know, sometimes you gotta take a punch or two in life. It is what it is. If I ever say I can't stop and I won't stop, I mean I won't stop ignoring the mountaintops of the giants in these videos because that section of the game is boring as all hell. Believe it or not, the Wing of Astel is good against the fire giant too, but it's not good enough to keep him from running away. Just like my dad. I'm kidding. Everybody relax, alright? My dad didn't run out on my family. Come to think of it, I can't remember the last time I actually saw him run anywhere. But what he lacks in athleticism, he makes up for in knowledge of classic cars, okay? You would not catch that man in a Hellcat. Ah, shit, I forgot I actually died on this attempt. No wonder why the file was so freaking big. But it wasn't the end of the world because I was apparently getting duped and or speckledorfed out of the most optimal damage numbers and script possible for the giant. I don't even know what the heck I did differently this time around, but it's like I blinked and half of his health was just gone. I got the fire giant down to phase 2, and I unfortunately did not get a clutch stagger from hitting his hand, but I did have a Hollywood-level escape from being burned alive from his secret mouth. It's probably not the best time to mention Hollywood while making a joke about being burned alive, but I have been known as one that can read a room, so it is what it is. The Fire Giant is basically just a more action-packed and exciting version of Renala's fight in the sense that the second phase is mostly you just running around for 30 seconds to get an opportunity to get one hit in, and then you have to wait another 30 seconds to get another hit in. You see this damage? It actually took me until 2027 to get this, okay? Don't say I'm not dedicated. The sequence that won the battle for me could have easily wound up getting me killed. I got wedged in between his leg and this conveniently placed tree stump, and I had to wiggle myself out of there to attack a couple times. In the end, I had the perfect amount of FP to get off 3 consecutive L2s and eliminate the Fire Giant from playoff contention. Then, just as I was celebrating my most impressive victory yet, my lovely maiden decided to desert our relationship and fucking kill herself in an enormous cauldron of fire. Damn it, it just keeps happening to me over and over. Damn, I shouldn't have smoked that shit. I woke up in Knoxville, Tennessee. Alright, so if you don't get that joke, let me break it down. Farah, Missoula has a shitload of tornadoes. Tennessee gets hit by the most tornadoes in the US every year. Yeah, you see how like 1 and 1 makes 2 right here? Alright, good. The Godskin duo managed to jump my ass and take me out the first time around, so I won't talk as much shit on them this time. But it was pretty cut and dry on the winning attempt. I just went with the sleep pot strategy because I felt like it. And, yeah, this is happening right now, big fella. Alright, whether you like it or not. That is an obscene amount of damage. And you know what? You deserve it. I mean, really, what the hell do you guys want me to say here? He's getting obliterated. There's no way around it. There's nothing else for me to say. You know, the funny thing is, someone out there who's playing Elden Ring for the first time is just now discovering that sleep pots are a thing and that they can do this to the Godskin duo. I love thinking about stuff like that. The other thing about clearing the Godskins is that I was finally able to get a hold of a Somber Ancient Dragon Smithing Stone, which means I could finally max out the Wing of Astel. And the timing was impeccable because next up was Dragon Lord Placidusax. Boy, I ran into this fight with my eyes bigger than my stomach. Not because I planned on eating the Dragon Lord or anything, but because I knew the Ash of War was perfect for this fight. It did pretty good damage, all things considered, but I got a little too greedy for a stagger and I wound up getting vaporized. I let my excitement get the better of me, and as a result, my performance was a little slippity-sloppity. Placidusax staggered, but I had an oh shit moment when I realized I ran out of FP. I missed out on a lot of potential damage from having to use an FP flask right here. I was still making pretty good time though. I think Placidusax got offended that I attacked his Placidu Ballsack because he immediately ran away right here. Dude, we are literally 3 years into the game now, and I still get hit with some bullshit on this vanishing combo. I dodge the same way over and over again, and sometimes I get hit, sometimes I don't. I don't get it. Thankfully, there wouldn't need to be an opportunity to dodge that again in this fight, because he went for one of his various fire breath attacks and gave me an opportunity to get under his Placidosi and fire off some nebulas, causing another stagger. And with that, I casually stroll over to his big face, thanked him for the free runes I was about to get, and ended the fight with a riposte. By the way, I went and grabbed the Intelligence Not Crystal tier before fighting Malekith because I probably should have done that, like, right at the start of the run. I had some questions going into the Malekith fight about how useful Nebula would be, but thankfully they were answered almost immediately. Malekith is pretty evasive, but when Nebula hits, good God almighty. I got some chip damage off with pieces of Nebula, but eventually phase transitioned him with a charged attack. One thing I should have mentioned earlier in the video is that the Axe Talisman doesn't actually do anything to increase the power of the charged attack for the Wing of Astel for some reason. But after seeing this ludicrous damage, part of me feels like that was intentional. I got underneath Malekith and punished him with another charged attack, causing a stagger that should have spelled the end of the fight right here. Yeah, I could nitpick and say I should have riposted first, but how was I supposed to know dude was gonna pop up like a cheap jump scare right there? It's all good though. I won the dogfight this time around. Eat your heart out, Michael Vick. I gotta get my act together with these jokes, man. What the fuck? Speaking of jokes, here's how Gideon went.
To stand before the Elden Ring, to become Elden Lord. What a sad state of affairs. I commend your spirit, but alas, shall take the American I know in my bones, a tarnished cannot become a lord. Not even you.
And with that, it's time to get into an actual fight against Hoaraloo. But we're not going to talk about the first attempt because I got blown to fucking smithereens. It took me a couple tries to figure out exactly when I would be able to use the Ash of War, since that's basically the key to actually breaking the game with this weapon. I found that even though I would have less chances, the results were still pretty insane. I had to be more patient against Godfrey with our trusty Wing of Astel because he just wasn't giving me enough time to cast the Ash of War, and he shouldn't. I mean, he's one of the final base game bosses, so I'm not exactly expecting him to just stand there and be like, oh yes, please kill me, please take it. So I had to rely on my game knowledge and time my Ash of War with the start of his dashing stomp attack so the explosion would line up with the point of contact. His second phase is much more aggressive, but the changes in his movement patterns wound up benefiting my game plan. I narrowly avoided becoming his punching bag and was able to counter with a massive charged attack. In a split-second brain blast, I had the idea to launch a nebula in between his Earthshakers, and I'm not gonna lie, this clip makes me look a lot better at the game than I actually am, because this play was pretty sick for my standards. And in the end, it's what wound up giving me the win. Before the Rata Beast battle, I grabbed the Golden Vow incantation to finally replace the Ash of War buff I've been rocking with the whole time. Was it worth me putting all these stats into Faith instead of Intelligence or Dex? I don't really know, but don't worry, because a keyboard cretin in the comments section will surely show up any minute now to call me a worthless waste of sperm about how I choose to level up my character in a video game. There are two things to take away from the opening to Radagon. One, this weapon is still absolutely busted. And two, I have no idea how his second hammer swing hit me right there. That looked like some Dark Souls 2 type of shit, and I haven't even played that game. Radagon got punished off a swing and a miss, but I had a small lapse in judgment when I opted to drink a flask instead of going for a riposte. Radagon is probably my favorite boss fight in the base game, so it's a shame this fight didn't really last longer. But with this weapon, it's actually a challenge to make fights last that long, unless it's against Renala. You know what? I'm not even going to say shit for the Elden Beast portion of the fight. I'm just going to let this play out. Alright, so basically the weapon is cracked, and at this point in the video there is enough evidence that suggests you should use it the next time you play through Elden Ring. Since Elden Beast was dead, it was time to get access to Millennia and the DLC, so I grabbed the first Haligtree medallion, and then I made my way to Commander Nile. His summons were dead before they could even get an attack off, but unfortunately, I got greedy and was caught panic rolling on the first attempt. Now, the second time around, I got pieced up by the summon with the shield, and I was not happy about that. But luckily, I would be able to take out my anger on Nile. Some bosses in this game can be baited into a specific cycle of attacks with the proper positioning, and Nile happens to be one of them. My method for this fight was to wait for his high jump kick, roll to the left, and dodge the staff follow-up, and then launch a Nebula Ash of War as the punish. And then it was pretty much rinse and repeat from right there. I wonder what the world would look like if I actually riposted these bosses instead of using an FP flask whenever I break their stance. Thankfully, I am never punished for that mistake. Night night, Nile. Thank you for the second half of the Haligtree medallion. I traversed the consecrated snowfield until I found the teleporter to Mohg's palace. And then, I challenged the man himself. I may have taken a hit out of greed, but not before absolutely piecing Mohg up. Okay, I know I haven't been riposting these bosses all video, but I think using another Ash of War here made sense, okay? You know, maybe with a bit more planning I could have one-cycled Mohg here, but if there's one thing I'm not gonna do, it's plan for a boss fight. I was dealing shitloads of damage, but it wasn't enough and I had to settle for a two-phase fight. And since I went all in on maximizing my damage, I didn't have the Purifying Crystal tier in my physic. I may or may not have had another close call that would have gotten me killed on another day, but since I happen to be using what I consider to be one of the top 5 best unique skills in the game, I don't get punished for my mistakes even when I do happen to get punished. Wrap your head around that one. With Mohg done, I just had Millennia left on the base game itinerary. But before her, we actually had to take on 2 bosses, with the first being the damn battle mages on these bridges, and of course, Miss Loretta being the second. Loretta has solid magic damage resistance at 40%, so I was really surprised to see how much damage Nebula was doing with a clean connection. I should know better than to be surprised by the Wing of Astel at this point. She did me a huge favor by just walking into the Ash of War, and at this point, it's easy to say that Nebula is just something that saves you from having to actually use your brain. The only thing that keeps this thing from being above the Blasphemous Blade is that it doesn't heal your HP back like the Blasphemous Blade does. Everything else about this weapon is either on par or better in my opinion. Before getting down to Millennia, I made sure to grab the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman because I definitely needed it for the upcoming fight. The big question going into Millennia was how useful Nebula was going to be, and I thought that question was answered in the beginning stages of the fight. However, I quickly ran into the major issue that would plague me throughout the course of all the Millennia attempts. This bitch input reads our Ash of War, so more often than not, she's just gonna avoid taking damage entirely from it. Which, if you've been paying attention over the course of the video and ascertain what makes this weapon game-breaking, you'll understand that, yeah, that's a bit of a problem. For the very first time though, I discovered and employed a pretty neat strategy. If you have either crystal darts or some other throwable object like throwing knives, you can basically bait her into waterfowl from a distance, making it much easier to dodge. So let me explain what I mean about baiting out waterfowl with throwing objects. I imagine someone out there has probably found this out by now, and I am by no means well versed in how Millennia's AI functions, but I noticed that if I threw 3 crystal darts at her, and she didn't go for waterfowl after the 3rd dart was thrown, I was safe to run up to her and not worry about a random waterfowl attack for that particular sequence, or more than likely until after she went for any other attack. My observation began to gain more traction in my head when she popped up for waterfowl on the 2nd dart of that particular salvo, which has really started to make me think that this is something legit you can employ in your fights against her if you're not great at dodging waterfowl up close like me. Much to my surprise, I was able to get her down to phase 2 on my very first attempt. And Millennia gets a shitload more aggressive in phase 2. I mean, I'm talking this woman turns into the Terminator or some shit, just non-stop running at you and does not give you a chance to breathe. I was doing pretty good and making the most of my opportunities, but I didn't have any heals left and I knew my chances of winning were pretty slim at this point. I fought with all my heart and soul, but this time, it just simply wasn't enough. After 2 days worth of fighting Millennia, my brain was fried, and it reflected in my playstyle. I don't know what was going through my head, but I was almost exclusively dealing damage with tap R2s. It's a super safe strategy, but the downside is, the first phase of the fight took an eternity and a half. I also dropped the crystal dart strategy I was using to bait out waterfowl because I realized any projectile would be useful for this. So the tap R2 turned into the substitute for that particular technique. Even though I'm not doing game-breaking amounts of damage and I had to actually lock in for a real fight, I guess I could still consider this game-breaking since I didn't actually have to engage with Millennia and be close to her to fight her. I stayed at a pretty comfortable distance away and I fought at my own pace. Thank God I wasn't streaming this because you guys definitely would have fallen asleep during the fight. Which reminds me, I will be streaming more in the future, and I'll talk more about that later. The unfortunate side effect of using this weapon is that I can't punish Millennia's Scarlet Aeonia, but it does still give me enough time to collect my thoughts and think of what I should eat for dinner. Let's see, should I have that leftover ziti in the freezer, or should I order some Popeyes tonight? Yeah, you know what? I think I'm gonna go with Popeyes tonight. I was able to land my actual first Ash of War of the fight, which caused me to take some damage in return, but at least she was nice enough to wait for me until I got up. True warriors only fight fair. I was starting to run out of heals, but I felt like I was close to breaking her stance, and I knew that that would be the key to victory if I could capitalize on that. I managed to clip her a couple times with Nebula, but eventually I was able to get a huge stance break, but I reflexively rolled backwards, so I wasn't in a position to actually riposte. I had to settle for a charged R2 instead, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I had to seriously lock in for the remainder of the fight. So, I'm just gonna let the rest of the fight play out for you guys. Yeah, that was pretty sick. Words cannot describe how relieved I was when I finally beat her. With all of the base game bosses that I actually cared about defeated, I turned my attention to the DLC and gathering Scattertree fragments. As per usual, I started off my DLC debauchery in Bellerot, home of some common enemies that even put base game bosses to shame. The Dancing Lion marks a transition in the style of boss that you face in Elden Ring, as most of the DLC bosses are very mobile and don't really play into the effectiveness of this build. I knew I'd really have to pick and choose my opportunities to attack with her Ash of War because there was always a possibility the Dancing Lion would just dash out of the way of our little nebula explosions. The only time it stands still is when it's attacking, so I had to keep that in mind. If you've played the DLC and battled against this season's winner of Dancing with the Stars, you'll probably agree that the lightning portion of its second phase is by far the most threatening to deal with. So, I played more conservatively against the lightning, and when he decided to cosplay as an airbender, that's when I went on the offensive. After sidestepping a vertical and horizontal tornado, I had to wait a little while to get another clear-cut chance at spamming the Ash of War. I was surprised I didn't get a stance break at this point. The dancing line was really trying to hold on. It even managed to hold on with a pube hair's worth of health at the death. And once the lightning phase kicked in, with me stuck in the corner, I started to panic a little bit. But luckily, I managed to avoid choking this time around, so I left the fight with a solid dub. Quick note, I tried Renala next, and I gave up. So I decided to move on to a boss I knew a little better and go back to R'Lana later. Mesmer is one of my favorite bosses in the DLC, and while I do know his fight very well, I still had to lock in. His combos are super acrobatic and remind me of like a Bruce Lee or Jackie Chan stunt choreography. I was leaning on the charged heavy attacks more in this fight because they were simply the most optimal way to fuck Mesmer's shit up. Attacking Mesmer in his snake form does hurt me a little bit since I have a pet ball python that I love very dearly and I feel like I'm committing a crime because they look very similar, but it's something that needs to be done here. I felt like I was focusing a little too hard on getting another stance break, but it's hard to not think about that when you're using this weapon. It's similar to using the iron balls or the star fist. Once you get in the habit of fishing for stance breaks, you expect to see them all the time. I got a pretty fortunate dodge while drinking a flask, which was pretty cool. Unfortunately, I couldn't replicate it. The single criticism I have of this fight is that in my head, I may be slightly delusional and I think that I can just dodge every attack 100% of the time. It's kind of like those memes about being like 12 beers deep during your family's annual Thanksgiving football game and thinking that you're prime Tom Brady throwing piss missiles out there on your front lawn. The end of the fight was pretty funny. I did enough damage to bring his health to 0, but I got jump scared by his snake form going for one final attack out of spite. With Mesmer beaten, it was time to return to R'Lana and face the music. You'll notice that during most of my attack opportunities, I don't go for the Ash of War or a charged heavy attack, and that's because in my previous attempts, they weren't working very well. Since I couldn't punish with charged heavy attacks, I figured I would try to build the stagger meter, but that just meant I would be taking unnecessary chip damage. The majority of my heavy attacks were tapped R2s that launched the little baby wave at R'Lana and did, well, baby amounts of damage. The other issue is that I was dealing with her damn input reading. This didn't affect me too badly when leading into the charge attacks, but my god, trying to use the Ash of War against her was horrible. She just sidestepped the shit out of it. But Lady Luck finally smiled in my direction when during R'Lana's phase transition, I had a full bar's worth of FP and stamina and laid down a salvo of nebulae and got a stance break just before meeting my probable demise. The resulting riposte and post-riposte ashes did a huge number on her health bar, and from that point onward, I basically just had to get out of the way of her massive balls and simply not fuck up, which I almost did. This was a huge relief because I was stuck on her fight for a few days and I was starting to think I'd have to resort to using the damn mimic tier like a chump, but not this time though. Next on the agenda was the Putrescent Knight, but I felt like I was a little underleveled, so I decided to gather a couple more Scadu fragments before the fight. How it feels to gum 5 chew. I don't fucking know, man. Yeah, there's not much to say about this dude because even though there is evidence that he clearly killed me because of my runes on the ground, he got fucking obliterated this time around. I just don't understand how I couldn't do this the first time. It was painfully easy. Before going off to the next couple boss fights, I went and grabbed the Oh Mother emote for later, and then I had to drain the still water out of the Shadow Keep so I could flush out the evidence of all the alleged mob hits that I was involved in throughout the Shadow Realm. The next boss I challenged was Commander Gaius, and even though I see a lot of people's opinions on him have changed over time, mine still has not. He is still very pee-pee caca in my eyes. But you know how sometimes you just have an epiphany and figure out how to dodge that one troublesome attack? Yeah, me neither. The attempt started off simple, with me just getting a bit of chip damage off. Then things started to get out of hand, and not for me. I took some damage during his rodeo combo, as I like to call it, but then the Wing of Astel decided to bring Sexy back and bring Game Breaking back into the run. Gaius did this combo twice in a row, and on the second time I got a stance break, which just meant free damage, and all of a sudden I was looking at Commander Gaius with very little health left. All that was left was dodging his spinning gravity thrust, which is not hard, and then I just skill spammed my way to victory. That's 2 bosses in a row that were a lot easier than I was making them out to be my first couple attempts against them. And of course, how could I forget to include everyone's favorite part about beating Commander Gaius? At this point, I took on the Scatter Tree avatar, and I was having some issues with it. You wanna know why? Because this thing is a huge prick. I can't reach his fucking head. Since I was having a hard time getting the neurons in my brain to fire and remember how the hell this boss works, I decided to focus on hitting his shaft, which I don't think he was very pleased with a man doing. I quickly discovered the charge heavy attack was just taking a smidge too long to be viable, so I leaned into the tap R2s. Still, it wasn't saving me from his Viet Cong traps that he was laying everywhere. By dodging his golden sunflower slam, I was able to finally use my charge heavy attack to good effect and get the riposte off for the second phase. However, I was not satisfied with my performance so far, and I was getting irritated I had to heal so much already. The only thing I have going for me is that I rarely, if ever, get hit by these dash attacks that the Avatar pulls out to start off the second phase. If no one else got me, I know that Nebula got me. They should call me the Lumberjack the way I'm jacking up this lumber. The Skadutar's third phase opening is easier to dodge in my opinion. I see a lot of streamers and YouTubers do this weird, goofy jump timing technique, but I just go by the auditory sound cue of the explosion and I hit the dodge button immediately as I hear it. The cooldown time also lets you get off a ton of free damage. And yeah, after dashing around a couple times, he loaded up his triple-barreled explosion, which did absolutely nothing except to give me the opportunity to close out the fight for free. Up next on my list was Midra, but that meant first I had to get through the Dark Light Catacombs. Luckily for me, I stay strapped up with glowstones for situations exactly like this. When I made it to the boss room, I decided to try out the backstab cheese against Jory, so I swapped the Ritual Sword Talisman out for the Blade of Mercy because I knew I would not be at full health once this dickhead started summoning his lackeys. Well, I was half right. It wasn't even the summons that did it. I thought I was in perfect position to get a backstab here, but the game decided to scam the shit out of me. Jory is nothing more than a spammer boss, so the fight is more of a test of your own patience and how much you can keep your cool. But to be fair, it does foreshadow what you have to face in Iniri Lim. I thought things were on the up for me when I finally got a backstab and got the Blade of Mercy boost, but the fight quickly turned into a clusterfuck at this point. I thought I'd be able to do a little bit of my own spamming, but I once again got scammed by FromSoft because Jory just so happened to stand 3 inches away from the Nebula hitboxes. Yeah, you see all this shit right here? This is peak Jory. What you're watching on screen now is nothing short of a circus. But that doesn't matter because I'm fly as shit and fresh as fuck, so I get these backstabs like I'm Sammy the Bull Gravano. Garvano, Galliano, Garbanzo. Who gives a fuck? Jory's dead, and that's all that matters at the end of the day. I made my way through the absolute slog that is the Abyssal Woods and rested just outside Midra's chamber, where I upgraded my Shadow Realm Blessing to 13 and sorted out my Physic Flash to make sure I was in tip-top shape. Midra is one of my favorite boss fights in the entire game, so I wanted to show up respectable. I kept the Blade of Mercy on because I had a feeling I'd be getting a stance break or two in this fight, and even though I would eventually be proved correct, I was not prepared for how well the fight would go. There's no point in being cryptic and mysterious and beating around the bush, so let me just show you how it went down. I know the point of the video is to break the game with the Wing of Astel, but I'm still proud of how I played against Midra considering his health bar is enormous and a couple of his combos can just blast you into the void. 2 Nebulas and a charged heavy triggered a stance break, giving me the Blade of Mercy attack boost already. And as he phase transitioned, I pulled out the old bait and switch to trip up the tracking on this attack just enough to get away from the explosion. Now, it was time for the real fun to begin. Yeah, you see this spinning attack? You can just crouch it and avoid it. It's genius. His next 3 attacks are just peak Midra gameplay. So for one, the timings on this 5-piece combo are spaced a little oddly, but they're pretty simple to dodge. I also found out he can sometimes cancel the follow-up for his grab attack, which I've never seen before, and he has a massive frenzy fireball that you can only dodge with lightning quick reflexes, and I was having a blast dealing with all of it. One more cast of Nebula got me another stance break, but I had a slight miscue because I fat-fingered my B button, so I settled for slightly less damage from a backstab critical hit. It still gave me the Blade of Mercy boost, so I wasn't complaining. And I got a little greedy, but I was feeling myself, so I'll forgive myself. It was coming close to the end, and Midra just had nothing for me that I couldn't deal with. And in the end, one final cast of Nebula, 1 dodge of a 180 from Midra, 1 more slight miscue, and 2 more light attacks got me a first try Midra kill for the very first time, which I was super happy with if you can't tell by my reaction in the gameplay. With Midra down, there's only a handful of fights left. And now, it's time for the fight you've all been dying to see. Flock of Turtles versus the $6 million man himself, Ancient Dragon Man. While his name is nothing to write home about, his fight is also nothing to write home about. I mean, it's an NPC fight we're talking about here. He can't be staggered, he heals himself, he's just a huge pain in the ass. I eventually got his bitch ass into a stagger loop from Nebula, and honestly, I don't feel one shred of remorse. He deserves it for having that stupid ass fucking name. And when I got to Bale, he was not going smoothly, mostly because I couldn't find Egon's damn summoning sign. There was also the slight issue of me being slightly trash at this boss. Not completely trash, but just trash enough to possibly make you think twice about listening to tips from me about how to beat him. This might sound a little silly, but I didn't realize how much Bale, moves around the arena until I tried to spam my Ash of War, and I realized that the fight wouldn't be that simple. That was until I figured out I was better off getting closer to Bale, and I invaded his personal space so I could spam the Ash of War like the absolute dope that I am. Egon took aggro for just long enough that Bale must have forgotten that I was literally the one that walked into the arena, and it was enough of a distraction to ensure I got a stance break. Bale's stance break time is a little longer than most bosses, so I was able to comfortably remove a shit ton of HP from his health bar before his phase transition. Note to self, jumping is the correct way to dodge Bale's magma nuke, but you still gotta time it correctly. Luckily, that little blunder didn't affect the outcome of the battle because Bale was still distracted by Egon, and that allowed me to pretty much get a free kill at the end of the day. Definitely not one of the better showings, but Bale is still a fearsome boss, and this weapon once again trivialized a ridiculously powerful enemy. Unfortunately, I had to follow up a good boss in Bale with a dogshit one in Mateer, and that also means I had to do the pretty mundane and tedious questline associated with it. I'm not a fan of Mateer's boss fight. In fact, I'm an active hater of this enemy, combat and lore-wise. But the one thing going for me is that Mateer's actually in the category of gravity enemies, so she takes that 20% extra damage I mentioned at the start of the video. This is the shit I don't like. What are you even supposed to do to dodge this? I literally don't understand. I'll take trades like that all day though. Anything but the finger molester attacks. I dodged the cheeky laser beam and I went on the offensive, launching my Ash of War in an attempt to get a stance break. Unfortunately, I couldn't get one before triggering Mateer's phase transition, which kinda sucks because a stance break would have probably won me the fight even from where her health bar was. But the next best thing is to wait for her hammerhead attacks, and thankfully the Wing of Astel is one of the top 5 easiest weapons to use in the entire game. Yeah. I'm going to enjoy watching this footage while I can, because this is probably the easiest Mateer fight I'm ever going to have outside of playing the Convergence mod. Well, there's only 2 Remembrance bosses left, and the first one rhymes with Bomina. Before we talk about the actual fight, I must say I have rescinded my stance on Ramina from the previous video. I no longer place her in the Smash category, and it has nothing to do with the fact that she was whooping my ass. I felt like my reaction time was slower against her this time, and it was putting me in a pretty precarious position. Not only was my HP bar getting lit up, but that rot meter was getting a little too close to maxing out for my comfort. Ramina is super mobile, even when she's not moving all over the arena, so it made it that much more difficult for me to utilize my Ash of War. Her attacks shift her body in all sorts of directions, and there were times where I would dodge an attack and be nowhere near her to be able to attack her back. I finally got her down to phase 2, and judging by where my rot meter is, I think you can guess where this is going. I wasn't exactly letting up her health bar, but in the heat of the moment, I was surprised I wasn't getting a stance break yet. Obviously, watching the footage back makes it easier to see that I was probably nowhere near close, but I was definitely still fishing for it. A lot of her attacks don't really do much damage, but as that rot meter went up, I was resigned to the fact that the clock was ticking. And after I got clipped with her halberd, I was officially in a race against the Scarlet Rot with only 1 flask of Crimson Tears left to my name. There was no getting around it. I was getting desperate, so I got up close and I started spamming the balls off my Ash of War, hoping for her stance break. Things were looking bleak, but at the most clutch moment ever, Ramina staggered, which allowed me to end off the fight with just seconds before succumbing to the Scarlet Rot. Mesmer's Kindling obtained from the boss battle, it was time to burn the Sealing Tree and head into the final gauntlet of Elden Ring's DLC, Anir Elim. Before taking on the final boss of the DLC, I had to take on the real final boss of the DLC, Letta and her allies. In my opinion, I don't think summoning an ally to help yourself should be considered taboo by anyone for this fight, whether it's the Mimic Tier or the Sanguine Noble Buddy, and quite frankly, I don't think I'm ever going to do this again without summoning Natan for assistance. NPC bosses are tricky no matter where in the game you fight them, but this fight is simply not it. I can think of a list of 10 things right now I'd rather do than fight this boss. Number 1. Get a prostate exam. Number 2. Get my balls waxed by a hairy Russian woman. Number 3. Do the Wendy's 4x4 challenge. If you don't know what that is, you gotta get a Wendy's 4x4 combo, go to a running track, consume 1 item before running a lap around the track, and you have to do that 4 times until you finish the combo. It's a lot easier said than done. 4. Go to Guitar Center to try out some guitars and amps, and have a washed-up alcoholic guitar player mansplain to me what a pentatonic scale is. Which has already happened to me once, by the way. Yeah, you gotta take the root note, and then it's just 5 notes when you play and then the minor third, and then you add the blues note. Like, oh yeah, thanks, bud. I learned that like 7 years ago, but thanks. Thanks, I appreciate you drooling all over the fucking Jackson that I was planning on trying out. Yeah, thanks, I appreciate that. Number 5, shave a stripe down the middle of my head. So I have just a bald stripe going straight down the middle of it. Yeah, I would rather do that. Number 6, wear a Dallas Cowboys jersey. Number 7, watch an Eagles game from the Chip Kelly era. Number 8, walk outside in the snow barefoot. Number 9, drink a can of the green Red Bull flavor. That shit is super ass. I do not recommend that one. And finally, number 10, going to a Falling in Reverse show. This fight is ass, and I dread it every single time. But it's over now, so it's time for the final challenge of the run. Can we break FromSoft's most ridiculous boss creation in history with the Wing of Astel? The answer to that question is hell yeah, brother. Here's the thing about how the winning attempt went. It was arguably one of my worst performances out of the entire time I spent on Radahn during this run. But I'd argue that's what makes the Wing of Astel so game-breaking in this context, because it absolutely turned what would normally have been a death into a win. You can clearly see in the gameplay that I was getting pieced up from every attack imaginable, but it didn't matter. The Ash of War's casting time, for lack of a better phrase, because, it's not a spell, fit perfectly into the punish windows for a lot of Radahn's attacks. I was ripping off chunks of his health with the press of a button, and before I knew it, Phase 2 of the fight was upon us. Expecting the Holy Arena AoE, I chugged an FP and healing flask, but sometimes Radahn opts for a hologram slash attack, and this caught me off guard and almost got me killed. Thankfully, I dodged the latter stages of the combo. The grab attack is the easiest attack to dodge, which meant free damage for me. The second easiest attack to dodge came directly afterwards, and even though I got clipped by one of the holy aftershocks, I got some solid damage off. Your spacing and running angle has to be damn near perfect to pull off this dodge, but if you can count to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and hit the dodge button, you're good. I launched another Nebula Radahn's way and had a major close call. Getting hit by one part of this combo almost always spells doom, but by the skin of my teeth, I managed to stay alive. I was in rough shape and spammed 2 desperation heals when Radahn pulled out a combo that's arguably harder to dodge. But it didn't matter, because in a certified brain blast moment, I dodged all of it perfectly. I could feel a stance break coming in the air, and once Radahn went for the grab attack again, I knew I had him. The sweet, sweet stance break allowed me to get off a riposte at the perfect time, right around the point where he should be going for his Shooting Star Arena nuke. I had just enough FP left for an Ash of War, and after rolling past a feeble stomp, I defeated Radahn, Consort of Mikola, proving that you can indeed break Elden Ring with the Wing of Astel. Oh yeah, streaming schedule. Saturdays and Sundays, I don't know what time. Hit the notification bell, and also Tuesdays and Thursdays. So that will be Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. I'm going to start streaming. I've been Flock of Turtles. Thank you for watching. You've been amazing, and I'll see you in the next one.